Students, welcome to lesson 20. In this lesson, we're going to be doing something that's a little bit difficult. We're going to be working on graphing coordinates on a coordinate plane. Now, the lesson itself isn't all that difficult. It's pretty easy to understand what a coordinate pair is and how a point graphs to the coordinate plane using what the point tells you. We're going to get a lot of that in the next video as we practice. The thing that's hard about this is understanding what a coordinate pair is. So far, we've been working with variables that could take on one value. And usually we've been dealing with a variable that's just a single variable in an equation that we can solve. We can graph that variable to the number line then as a point on the number line when we solve it. Here, we're going to be dealing with coordinates. When we're dealing with coordinates, we're actually dealing with two variables. And that's what's different about this lesson. We don't just have x as a variable, we have x and y, two variables. And I'm going to show you by the end of this lesson why that's important. A lot of the important stuff in this lesson is going to come in the second video. This first video is a bunch of terms that you need to understand in order to get what's happening in the second video. Let's dive in. First of all, we'll say, what is a coordinate plane? The coordinate plane that we're going to be graphing to is made up of two perpendicular number lines, one horizontal, one vertical, and we're plotting solutions to equations with two unknowns, two variables. So for every point on a coordinate plane, there's actually two coordinates, an x coordinate and a y coordinate, and those coordinates correspond to two variables. Here's an example of what the coordinate plane looks like. We split the coordinate plane into four quadrants. You might hear in the word quadrant, quad, four, okay? This is the first quadrant where x and y are both positive. The second quadrant is where x is negative and y is positive. Third quadrant is where x and y are both negative. And in the fourth quadrant, x is positive, y is negative. All right. Now, looking at this coordinate plane, you'll notice there's an x-axis, that's the horizontal number line here, and a y-axis, the vertical number line here. Like I mentioned, there's these four quadrants that we divide the xy coordinate plane into. The origin is marked with letter O here. It's the point 0, 0, or the intersection of the x and y axes. An ordered pair or a coordinate pair is two numbers in parentheses separated by a comma that tells you where a point is. It gives you the location of a point on the coordinate plane. The other thing you need to know about those ordered pairs is that they are solutions to an equation with two variables. We're going to talk a lot about that this year. For now, though, you're basically going to need to learn how to graph an ordered pair on a coordinate plane. The x-coordinate it's the first number in an ordered pair. So ordered pairs always go x and then y, x and then y. The first number gives the distance to the left or the right of the origin. A negative x-coordinate goes to the left of the origin. A positive x-coordinate goes to the right. The y-coordinate works the same way, except it's the distance above or below the origin or the horizontal axis. So it's the second number in a coordinate pair. So we always give x comma y in a coordinate pair. We're going to see what that means in the next video. It gives the distance above or below the horizontal axis. And then lastly, a coordinate is a number that helps you locate a point on a graph. Now, we'll get into what coordinates are in the next video, so stick with me. I just want to make sure you understand one other thing before we move on to actually graphing. When we're talking about variables, when we have a coordinate plane, we're dealing with two variables. And I've been calling those variables x and y, but really they have some special names to them as well. The x variable is called the independent variable. It's a variable whose value can be chosen. You are in control. We also call it the input variable. Now, it's a little confusing to say that this variable can be chosen because sometimes it can't. Sometimes you can directly choose the independent variable. Let me give you an example of this. So, for example, if I want to do a survey and see if there is any relationship between how tall students are and what their shoe size is. Now, I don't really actually control how tall students are. What I do control is who I ask, okay? And I can ask really tall students and I can ask really short students to figure out what their shoe sizes are. So maybe I go to like some third, second graders, kindergartners to find some shorter students and figure out what their shoe size is. And then maybe I ask some high schoolers, maybe I ask some really tall high schoolers what their shoe size is. I'm in control of who I ask. So I'm in control of how, like, the distribution of heights. I'm not in control of what anybody's shoe size is. Okay, that's just going to be the other variable. We call that the dependent variable. The variable whose value is determined by the input value of another variable, also called the output value. Now let me give you another example that's a little more clear as to me being in control of something. Maybe I think that if I drink more water during the day, I'm going to be able to do my homework faster because my brain is going to work better. I'm going to think more clearly. So I measure how many cups of water I drink during the day. And I am in complete control of how many cups of water I choose to drink during the day. But I'm not, what I'm saying is I'm not in complete control of how fast I do my homework. That really depends. It's dependent on how many cups of water I drink. So that would be another example of how you get to choose one of the values. You get to choose a variable, and then the other variable responds to what your choice is. The dependent variable is dependent on what you choose for your independent variable. Now here's where this comes into play with what we're talking about here. The independent variable goes on the x-axis. The dependent variable that responds to the independent variable, that goes on the y-axis. So when we graph variables, we consistently do x for independent, y for dependent. All right, let's move on to some practice problems and see what this is all about.